Chapter 1: The Gathering Storm. The Mediterranean in the mid-16th century was a theater of relentless conflict, where the forces of Christianity and Islam clashed for supremacy over trade routes, strategic strongholds, and the fate of entire civilizations. At the heart of this struggle stood the formidable Ottoman Empire, a superpower under the rule of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Having already expanded their dominion across the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, the Ottomans now sought to solidify their control over the central Mediterranean. One obstacle remained in their path: an island fortress held by a band of warrior monks, the Knights of St. John. That island was Malta. The Knights of St. John, also known as the Hospitallers, had a storied history dating back to the Crusades. They were a military order of warrior monks who had once ruled the island of Rhodes, only to be expelled by the Ottomans in 1522 after a brutal siege. Homeless and wandering, they had been granted the barren island of Malta by Emperor Charles V in 1530. Though Malta was small, rocky, and arid, its strategic importance was immense. Positioned between Sicily and North Africa, it was a gateway between Christian Europe and the expanding Ottoman Empire. From their new base, the Knights harassed Ottoman shipping, launching raids on Muslim merchant vessels and coastal settlements. These provocations enraged the Ottomans, who saw the Knights as a thorn in their side, an enemy that had to be eradicated once and for all. By 1564, the time had come for the Ottoman Empire to act. Sultan Suleiman, determined to crush the Knights and seize Malta for strategic dominance, ordered the assembly of a massive invasion force. The fleet that would set sail was among the largest the empire had ever gathered, consisting of nearly 200 warships and transport vessels carrying an army of over 30,000 soldiers. Among them were some of the most feared warriors in the Ottoman ranks: elite janissaries, battle-hardened Sniper cavalry, and ruthless corsairs under the command of Dragut, the infamous Barbary pirate and admiral. The army was led by Mustafa Pasha, a veteran commander, and supported by Admiral Piyali Pasha, one of the empire's most accomplished naval strategists. This formidable force was meant to make short work of Malta's defenses. Opposing them was a force that, by any military logic, should have been doomed to defeat. The entire garrison of Malta numbered no more than 6,000 men, including 500 knights, 2,000 professional soldiers, and roughly 3,500 local Maltese fighters, who, though courageous, were largely untrained and ill-equipped compared to the disciplined ranks of the Ottoman army. At the head of this outnumbered force stood Grand Master Jean Parisot de Valette, a seasoned veteran of 71 years. A French nobleman of unwavering determination, Valette had spent decades fighting the Ottomans and knew the importance of discipline, strategy, and morale. He understood that surrender was not an option. The Ottomans had a reputation for showing no mercy to their enemies. If Malta fell, its defenders would be slaughtered, and the road to Sicily, Italy, and the rest of Europe would be laid bare for future Ottoman conquests. The Grand Master had spent years reinforcing Malta's defenses, preparing for the inevitable Ottoman assault. The island's fortifications were formidable. The strongholds of Burgu and Sengli, protected by thick stone walls and deep ditches, were near impregnable. The small but crucial Fort St. Elmo guarded the entrance to the Grand Harbour, and Fort St. Angelo served as the Knights' central command. Cannons were positioned strategically, watchtowers were erected along the coastline, and provisions were stockpiled in preparation for a long siege. Despite these preparations, there was little illusion among the defenders about the scale of the challenge ahead. Valor and his commanders knew they were facing an enemy that had crushed far greater forces in past campaigns. The defenders' only advantage lay in their intimate knowledge of Malta's terrain, their unwavering discipline, and their willingness to fight to the last man. They sent urgent messages to Europe, pleading for reinforcements, but they knew help would not come quickly, if it came at all. As winter turned to spring in 1565, ominous reports reached Malta. Ottoman spies had been seen in nearby waters, enemy galleys were massing along the North African coast, and rumors swirled of a massive fleet preparing to set sail from Constantinople. By early May, the knights knew their time had come. The storm that had been brewing for years was about to break. The Ottoman Armada had left its ports, and its destination was clear: Malta. Valor gathered his men in the main square of Birgu and addressed them with solemn determination. "Brothers, we stand at the threshold of destiny. The enemy we face is vast, relentless, and without mercy. But we are not merely fighting for this island, we fight for Christendom, for honor, and for the very survival of our order. If we fall as warriors. If we prevail, we shall be remembered for all time. Stand firm, and let the enemy see that the Knights of St. John do not yield." With these words, the final preparations for battle began. Cannons were checked, walls reinforced, and the people of Malta prepared themselves for the siege that would decide the fate of their homeland. On May 18, 1565, dark sails appeared on the horizon. The Ottoman invasion had begun. Chapter 2: The Ottoman Onslaught. On May 18, 1565, the Ottoman Armada appeared on the horizon. Their ships, bristling with cannons, covered the sea like a dark cloud. As the invasion force disembarked, the defenders watched with grim determination. There would be no reinforcements, no chance of escape. This was a fight to the death. The Ottomans began by attacking Fort St. Elmo, the smallest and most vulnerable of Malta's fortifications, positioned on a peninsula guarding the Grand Harbour. If St. Elmo fell, the Ottomans could use the harbour to land their artillery and besiege the main cities of Birgu and Sengli. The fort, though small, held immense strategic value. The Grand Master, Jean de Valette, understood this and ordered his knights to hold out at all costs, knowing that every day they delayed the Ottomans gave the rest of the island more time to prepare. For weeks, the Ottoman cannons pounded the fort relentlessly. Every day, hundreds of cannonballs crashed into the walls, turning stone into dust and rubble. The relentless bombardment sent plumes of smoke and debris into the sky, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Yet, despite the devastation, the defenders refused to surrender. The fort's garrison consisted of a mix of battle-hardened knights, Spanish and Italian mercenaries, and Maltese soldiers, all driven by an unyielding determination to resist the invaders. The Ottomans, confident in their numerical superiority, launched direct assaults against the fort's shattered walls. Wave after wave of Janissaries and North African corsairs charged forward, screaming war cries as they scaled the battered defenses. But the defenders met them with an equal ferocity. Armed with swords, pikes, and muskets, they repelled attack after attack, using every resource available. The fighting was brutal, often degenerating into savage hand-to-hand combat as warriors grappled in the blood-soaked ruins. As the days dragged on, the situation inside Fort St. Elmo grew dire. Supplies ran dangerously low, and the wounded outnumbered the able-bodied. Food and water were scarce, and the heat of the Maltese summer turned the fort into an unbearable furnace. But the most horrifying aspect was the relentless bombardment. There was no moment of respite, no pause in the thunder of the cannons. The defenders patched their wounds as best as they could, using whatever cloth they could find to bandage their injuries before returning to the fight. Many knights fought despite grievous wounds, knowing that death was inevitable but determined to sell their lives dearly. The Ottomans, frustrated by the unexpected resistance, intensified their efforts. They constructed massive siege engines and deployed more artillery to break the fort's walls completely. By mid-June, Fort St. Elmo was little more than a heap of rubble, its defenses nearly non-existent. Yet, astonishingly, the defenders still held out, using the ruins to create improvised barricades and continuing to resist against all odds. Finally, on June 23, after nearly a month of continuous bombardment and brutal assaults, Fort St. Elmo fell. The Ottomans massacred the remaining defenders, displaying their bodies on crosses in the harbor as a warning to the other knights. But they had paid a heavy price. Over 6,000 Ottoman soldiers had perished trying to take the tiny fort. What should have been a swift victory had turned into a costly battle, delaying the Ottoman advance significantly. The delay allowed Valor to reinforce the remaining strongholds of Burgu and Senglea, setting the stage for the next phase of the battle. The siege of Malta was far from over, and the defenders, though battered, were more determined than ever to resist. The fall of Fort St. Elmo had been a tragedy, but it was also a testament to the resilience and courage of those who had fought to the last breath. Chapter 3: The Unbreakable Spirit. With St. Elmo destroyed, the Ottomans turned their fury on the twin fortresses of Burgu and Senglea. These cities, surrounded by thick walls, were the last hope for Malta. Valor knew that if these fortifications fell, the island would be lost. Every man, woman, and child within the strongholds understood the gravity of their situation. The Ottomans vastly outnumbered them, yet surrender was not an option. The Ottomans attempted every strategy in their arsenal. They launched wave after wave of direct assaults, only to be repelled by the desperate defenders. The walls of Burgu and Senglea shook under the constant impact of cannon fire, but the defenders worked tirelessly to repair breaches and reinforce weak points. When the enemy sent elite Janissary troops to scale the walls, the knights and Maltese soldiers met them with swords, spears, and boiling oil, turning every assault into a bloodbath. Frustrated by their inability to breach the defenses, the Ottomans built floating bridges to cross the harbor, hoping to isolate the two cities from one another. But the Maltese had anticipated this move. Under the cover of darkness, fire ships laden with tar and gunpowder were sent drifting towards the Ottoman structures, setting them ablaze and killing hundreds. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of burning soldiers as the night sky lit up with flames. Determined to break the stalemate, the Ottomans began digging tunnels beneath the fortresses, hoping to collapse the walls from below. However, the knights countered with their own network of tunnels. Beneath the earth, gruesome battles were fought in the dark, confined spaces, where men struggled for survival in the choking dust and suffocating heat. The underground combat was as fierce as that on the walls above, and each side suffered heavy losses. Disease and exhaustion ravaged both sides. The defenders were running low on food and fresh water, and many suffered from wounds left untreated due to a lack of medical supplies. Yet, despite starvation and fatigue, they refused to yield. The Ottomans, too, were suffering. Dysentery swept through their camp, and the once confident invaders now faced the realization that Malta would not fall as easily as they had expected. One of the most dramatic moments of the siege came during an Ottoman assault on Burgu. In the chaos of battle, an Ottoman soldier managed to scale the walls and plant the Sultan's flag atop the battlements, signaling what seemed to be an imminent victory. Seeing this, an elderly knight, wounded and barely able to stand, seized a sword and single-handedly cut down the invader. With the last of his strength, he ripped the flag from its pole and tossed it into the sea below. His act of defiance reignited the morale of the defenders, and they fought back with renewed fury. The battle for Malta had become a test of endurance. Each day brought new challenges, but the unbreakable spirit of the defenders would not falter. As the siege dragged on, the Ottomans grew increasingly desperate, while the knights and the people of Malta clung to the hope that reinforcements would come before it was too late. Chapter 4: A Desperate Gamble. As weeks turned into months, the Ottomans grew frustrated. Their forces were dwindling, and morale was plummeting. Disease had begun to take its toll on the invading army, with dysentery and malnutrition weakening both the soldiers and their resolve. The brutal Maltese summer, with its unrelenting heat, sapped their strength. Mustafa Pasha, the Ottoman commander, knew he had to break the defenders quickly. His prestige and reputation were on the line, and he feared the wrath of Sultan Suleiman should he fail to capture Malta. Thus, he devised a final, all-out assault to crush the last resistance in one decisive strike. By early September, the Ottomans had exhausted nearly every strategy in their arsenal. They had battered the walls of Burgu and Sengli with relentless cannon fire, launched wave after wave of direct assaults, and even tried psychological warfare, displaying the severed heads of captured knights on spikes. Still, the defenders would not break. Frustration boiled over within the Ottoman ranks. Desertions increased as soldiers, realizing they were embroiled in a seemingly unwinnable campaign, abandoned the cause. The chain of command was under strain, with Mustafa Pasha and his co-commander, Pioli Pasha, disagreeing over tactics. Yet, despite these difficulties, the Ottomans remained determined to seize the island. On September 7, Mustafa Pasha ordered the final and most ferocious attack yet. Under cover of darkness, thousands of Janissaries, the elite Ottoman soldiers, prepared to storm the walls. The assault was launched with terrifying precision. Scaling ladders were raised, cannon fire illuminated the night sky, and wave after wave of soldiers charged toward the battered defenses. The night echoed with the clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, and the shouts of desperate defiance from the defenders. Jean de Valette, despite his advanced age, was not content to command from the rear. Clad in his armor, sword in hand, he fought alongside his men, inspiring them with his presence. The Maltese, too, refused to yield, their homes and families at stake. The battle raged for hours, with neither side willing to retreat. The defenders threw boiling oil and flaming pitch onto the invaders, while archers and gunners rained down deadly fire. The walls of Burgu and Sengli became a nightmarish battleground, soaked in blood and littered with bodies. As dawn broke, the Ottomans realized they had failed once more. Despite suffering tremendous casualties, the knights and Maltese had held the walls. The defenders were battered and exhausted, but they remained unbroken. Mustafa Pasha, enraged at the failure of his grand assault, ordered another attack, but his troops hesitated. The confidence that had once fueled the Ottoman invasion was crumbling. Then, an unexpected turn of events changed the course of the battle. As the Ottomans regrouped for another offensive, a fleet of ships appeared on the horizon. It was the long-awaited relief force sent by the Spanish Viceroy of Sicily. Though numbering only a few thousand men, their presence sent shockwaves through the Ottoman ranks. The exhausted invaders, already demoralized by their losses, now faced the prospect of fresh reinforcements on the side of the defenders. Panic began to spread. Whispers of retreat filled the Ottoman camp as soldiers, weary from months of siege, questioned whether victory was still possible. Mustafa Pasha, sensing that his men were on the verge of breaking, faced a grim reality: his gamble had failed, and the siege of Malta was nearing its dramatic conclusion. Chapter 5: The Turning Point. The tides of war had shifted. The once mighty Ottoman forces, having besieged Malta with unrelenting aggression, now found themselves in an untenable position. Their ranks had been devastated by months of brutal combat, disease, and unyielding resistance from the defenders. What had seemed like an inevitable conquest had transformed into a prolonged nightmare, draining the morale of even the most battle-hardened soldiers in Mustafa Pasha's army. The arrival of fresh reinforcements, a force sent by the Spanish Viceroy of Sicily, struck the final blow to Ottoman hopes. Though not large in number, the reinforcements carried with them the weight of symbolic triumph. The sight of new, well-rested soldiers revitalized the exhausted defenders and shattered what little remained of Ottoman confidence. Mustafa Pasha, recognizing that his forces were stretched to the breaking point, made a fateful decision: he ordered a full retreat. The withdrawal was neither orderly nor disciplined. As the Ottomans attempted to embark on their ships, chaos erupted. The Knights of St. John, along with the Maltese defenders, seized the moment to unleash a final counterattack. The retreating Ottomans, weakened and demoralized, found themselves harassed at every turn. The narrow paths leading to the coastline became a killing field, as knights on horseback and foot soldiers cut down stragglers with merciless efficiency. Arrows rained down on the departing galleys, and cannon fire from the remaining Maltese artillery ensured that the Ottomans would not leave unscathed. By September 11th, the siege was officially over. The Ottoman army, once deemed invincible, had been utterly humiliated. Over 20,000 of their men lay dead, while the survivors, broken in spirit, sailed back to their empire in disgrace. The defeat at Malta reverberated across Europe and the Ottoman world alike. The sheer scale of their losses ensured that the dream of total dominance over the central Mediterranean would remain unfulfilled, at least for the foreseeable future. Malta had not just survived, it had emerged victorious. The island's resilience became legendary, and the heroism of Grand Master Jean de Valette and his knights would be remembered for centuries to come. The failed siege marked one of the most significant turning points in the conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Christian states of Europe. Though the struggle for dominance over the Mediterranean would continue, the events of 1565 proved that the Ottomans were not invincible and that even the mightiest empire could be resisted with unwavering determination and courage. Chapter 6: A Legacy of Strength. The aftermath of the Great Siege of Malta was both tragic and triumphant. The island lay in ruins, its fortifications shattered, its cities scorched, and its fields soaked in blood. Yet, despite the immense devastation, the people of Malta and the Knights of St. John had accomplished the seemingly impossible. They had defied one of the most formidable military forces in the world and emerged victorious. Their resilience had turned the tide of history and reshaped the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The European world, upon hearing of Malta's defiance, was stunned. For decades, the Ottoman Empire had appeared invincible, sweeping across territories with unmatched force, their conquest seeming inevitable. But Malta had proven otherwise. The defeat of the Ottomans sent shockwaves throughout Europe, inspiring resistance against further Ottoman expansion. The Christian states, once paralyzed by fear, now saw a glimmer of hope. If Malta, a tiny island with a small force, could stand against the might of Sultan Suleiman's army, then perhaps the Ottomans were not as unstoppable as they had seemed. The siege became a rallying cry, encouraging greater unity among European nations in the fight against Ottoman advances. In Malta itself, the survivors of the siege faced the daunting task of rebuilding. The cities of Birgu and Sengli, both heavily fortified and fiercely contested during the battle, were left nearly unrecognizable. Many of their buildings had been reduced to rubble, and entire districts had been obliterated by Ottoman cannon fire. Fort St. Elmo, which had become the symbol of the defenders' sacrifice, was little more than a pile of stones and shattered walls. But despite the destruction, the spirit of the Maltese people and the knights remained unbroken. They set to work immediately, determined to restore what had been lost and ensure that such a siege could never threaten their homeland again. At the heart of this rebuilding effort was Grand Master Jean de Valette, whose leadership during the siege had earned him immortal fame. A man of vision and determination, Valette understood that Malta needed stronger defenses, a more secure infrastructure, and a lasting tribute to the valor of those who had perished. Under his direction, a grand new city was conceived, a city that would stand as both a fortress and a beacon of resilience. In 1566, just a year after the siege, construction began on what would become Valletta, the new capital of Malta. Named in honor of its heroic Grand Master, the city was designed with cutting-edge military architecture, featuring towering bastions, deep moats, and a strategic layout that would make it nearly impregnable. Valletta was to be a living monument to the courage and sacrifice of those who had fought for Malta's survival. The legacy of the Siege of Malta extended far beyond its physical reconstruction. The battle had left a profound impact on European military strategy. The tactics employed by both sides, particularly the use of fortifications, countermining techniques, and combined land and sea defense strategies, were studied and adapted by military leaders across Europe. The Knights of St. John, once seen as a remnant of the medieval crusading era, emerged from the siege with newfound prestige. No longer dismissed as an obsolete order, they were now hailed as guardians of Christendom, a bulwark against Ottoman aggression. For the Ottoman Empire, the defeat at Malta was a rare and humbling setback. Though they would continue their campaigns in the Mediterranean and beyond, the loss had tarnished their aura of invincibility. It had demonstrated the limitations of their military might and the costs of prolonged sieges against determined defenders. Sultan Suleiman, though still a formidable ruler, would never again attempt a direct assault on Malta. His empire would soon turn its focus elsewhere, but the memory of the siege lingered as a bitter reminder of a failed conquest. As the years passed, Malta flourished under the leadership of the knights. The scars of war gradually faded, replaced by grand buildings, bustling harbors, and a strengthened economy. Valletta became a hub of culture and trade, attracting scholars, merchants, and artisans from across Europe. The spirit of resilience and defiance that had defined the siege remained embedded in Malta's identity, passed down through generations as a story of heroism and endurance. The Siege of Malta was more than just a battle, it was a turning point in history. It proved that courage, strategy, and unity could overcome overwhelming odds. It showed that even the mightiest empires could be challenged and that the fate of nations was not always determined by sheer numbers or brute force. For centuries to come, the siege would be remembered as one of the greatest military struggles of its time, a testament to the unbreakable will of those who stood in defense of their homeland. Though Grand Master Valor would not live to see the full completion of Valletta, his name remained immortalized in the city's walls and streets. He had not only defended Malta but had secured its future. To this day, the fortress city of Valletta stands as a reminder of the sacrifices made in 1565, a living monument to an age when a small island stood alone against the tide of an empire, and prevailed. Chapter 7: Lessons from Malta. The Siege of Malta is more than a historical battle, it is a lesson in resilience, strategy, and the power of human will. Against overwhelming odds, a small force of dedicated warriors stood firm and changed the course of history. Their victory was not only a military triumph, but a testament to the strength that comes from unity, courage, and determination. Throughout history, wars have been won by superior numbers, greater firepower, or technological advancements. Yet, Malta's victory was achieved through sheer perseverance, brilliant strategy, and the unwavering resolve of its defenders. The Knights of St. John, alongside the Maltese people, demonstrated an unbreakable spirit that turned what seemed like certain doom into one of the most celebrated triumphs of the 16th century. Their refusal to yield under the weight of seemingly insurmountable odds provides invaluable lessons for both military tacticians and everyday individuals facing struggles in their lives. The power of leadership. One of the most striking aspects of the siege was the leadership of Grand Master Jean de Valette. At nearly 70 years old, he was not a man content to watch the battle from afar. Instead, he took up arms and fought alongside his men, inspiring them with his courage and determination. His leadership exemplifies that true leaders do not command from behind, they lead by example, standing shoulder to shoulder with those they guide. Valette's strategic foresight in fortifying Malta and preparing for an inevitable Ottoman assault was a key factor in their survival. His ability to anticipate enemy tactics, maintain discipline among his troops, and inspire unity among disparate forces was instrumental in Malta's defense. His leadership is a timeless lesson in the importance of preparation, decisiveness, and the ability to inspire others in times of crisis. Unity and collective strength. The Siege of Malta was not merely a battle between two opposing armies, it was a struggle for survival that required every individual on the island to contribute. The Knights of St. John, the local Maltese population, mercenaries, and foreign volunteers fought as one, despite differences in nationality and background. Their unity in the face of annihilation proved that when people come together with a common goal, they can overcome even the most formidable adversaries. This lesson extends far beyond the battlefield. In times of crisis, whether in war, politics, or personal struggles, unity and cooperation are often the deciding factors between success and failure. A divided force crumbles, but a united one can stand against even the greatest challenges. The importance of resilience. Perhaps the most powerful lesson from Malta is the value of resilience. The defenders suffered unimaginable hardships, relentless bombardments, dwindling supplies, exhaustion, disease, and the gruesome sight of their fallen comrades. Yet, they refused to break. Even when Fort St. Elmo fell, even when the walls of Burgu and Sengli were crumbling, they fought on. Resilience is what defines great individuals and societies. It is the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity, to endure hardship without surrender, and to keep pushing forward despite overwhelming odds. The Siege of Malta is a perfect example of this principle in action. The defenders endured not because they were physically stronger, but because they possessed the will to survive and the determination to fight for their homeland. Strategic innovation. Another lesson from the siege is the importance of adapting and innovating under pressure. The defenders constantly adjusted their tactics to counter Ottoman strategies. When the Ottomans tried to tunnel under the walls, the knights dug counter-tunnels and engaged in brutal subterranean combat. When the enemy attempted to cross the harbor on floating bridges, the defenders sent fire ships to destroy them. Every time the Ottomans shifted their approach, the Maltese adapted and responded with ingenuity. This ability to innovate under pressure is crucial not just in military conflicts, but in business, science, and daily life. Challenges and obstacles are inevitable, but those who can think creatively and adjust their strategies in the moment will always have the advantage. The psychological impact of resistance. Beyond the physical battle, the siege demonstrated the psychological power of resistance. The Ottomans expected a swift victory. Instead, they found themselves bogged down in a grueling, months-long struggle that shattered their morale. The sight of the defenders repeatedly repelling overwhelming assaults took a toll on the invaders' confidence. This principle is evident in many aspects of life. Whether in negotiations, conflicts, or personal hardships, standing firm and refusing to give in can wear down opponents and shift the balance of power. Malta's defenders won not just with weapons, but with their sheer refusal to submit. The ripple effect on history. The victory at Malta had profound consequences for Europe. It shattered the illusion of Ottoman invincibility and inspired resistance across the continent. In Spain, Italy, and the Holy Roman Empire, the siege became a rallying cry, proving that the Ottomans could be defeated. Just 6 years later, in 1571, a coalition of Christian naval forces decisively defeated the Ottomans at the Battle of Lepanto, a victory that was influenced in part by the lessons learned at Malta. Had Malta fallen, the course of European history might have been drastically different. The Ottomans would have secured a crucial base in the central Mediterranean, allowing them to launch further invasions into southern Europe. The victory at Malta preserved not only the island but also the balance of power in the region. A timeless lesson in human will. For modern audiences, the story of Malta reminds us that even in the darkest moments, perseverance and belief in one's cause can lead to victory. It teaches us that no matter how powerful the adversary, no matter how hopeless the situation, the human spirit is capable of achieving the impossible. The Siege of Malta is a beacon of hope and a reminder that history is shaped by those who refuse to surrender. In an era where challenges can seem insurmountable, whether political, economic, or personal, the lessons from Malta remain relevant. Strength comes from unity, leadership, adaptability, and resilience. No matter the odds, those who stand firm, innovate, and fight for what they believe in can change the course of history. The legacy of Malta lives on, not just in the walls of Valletta or in history books, but in the enduring lesson that courage, strategy, and determination can overcome even the greatest of trials.